Ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank Phil to talk about the Subterranea Britannica. It's a very interesting organization working on the underground and especially for some military tunnels, military shelters. And I think Phil will give us a very interesting speech. Phil, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you today. My name is Phil Catling. I'm an archaeologist and historian, a photojournalist, and I've been involved with the group Subterranea Britannica, or Subbrit, much easier to say, for 15 years now. Subbrit is the UK underground research organisation. We investigate and open underground spaces across the UK, and we will open and research safely anything to do that is human-made or human-used. So we will look at all sorts of things: air raid shelters, bunkers, military tunnels, nuclear air remains, underground railways. Anything that's underground, we'll go and have a look at it. We do this from a position of safety, with a lot of our people being trained in high-risk confined spaces, like myself, or come from an engineering background. And we will do 3 magazines a year, and we do 2 visits or 2-day meetings per year, where we have speakers come to speak to us from all over the world and from all over Europe. And one of the things that I do for Subterranea Britannica is I arrange the speakers. I also arrange visits and take people out to places. And the reason that I got involved is because I was working with a place called Stockport Air Raid Shelters Experience. Stockport is a heritage town just below Manchester in the northwest of the UK, or northwest of England, and it is a transport hub and has been a transport hub for the railways for about 200 years. We have a very big viaduct that is the main route for the railways between the north ports and the southern section of the UK. So very important from a military perspective. During World War II, the area was obviously a target for military bombing, and so the decision was made by the local council that they were going to dig a number of very large civilian air raid shelters in the soft sandstone below Stockport. They ended up digging a number of these, and I was lucky enough to be able to run one of these as a visitor attraction for 14 years. So I was in charge of the air raid shelters and a number of other museums. But as part of the 14 years that I spent there, we worked on making sure the shelters were safe to the public. We were making sure that they were interpreted correctly, that the history and the sociological aspects of the shelters were delivered to a lot of visitors, and a lot of especially school children, because what we call the home front, so the UK experience of war during World War II, is on our curriculum. So a lot of school groups come to visit us. We would usually have 2 school groups a day during the schools being open, and we would take them safely around underground in the shelters, 60 feet below the streets of Stockport. On the screen, you'll see just a couple of bits. This should be the only writing in the slides that I have, and I will pass the slides on to Professor Wang, so that they are able to pass them on to anybody who'd like to see them. So, as part of the opening of the Stockport air raid shelters, we have delivered a shop, toilet, and interpretation centre, a visitor centre, that we're lucky enough to have in quite a main area of the town. The town is quite busy. It's on a commuter route into central Manchester. Manchester is one of our arguably our second city in the UK, and an industrial heartland. So we do get a lot of tourist visitors to Stockport, stopping off on their way into Manchester, and they want to see the air raid shelters tours. There's a couple of reasons for this. it's a unique location. There isn't another air raid shelters tour like this in the UK. It's the largest of the ones that are in the UK, and it's been featured on a number of television programs and a number of films. So we get people coming for the history aspect of it, for the engineering aspect of it, and from the film point as well. The network of tunnels, now this is just one of the 6 shelters that were built. This one, it's the one that's open to the public. It would have held 6,500 people during an air raid on bunks, and it was just over a mile in length throughout the tunnel network. And remember, there were another 5 of these, 3 of them the same size and 2 slightly smaller. So lots and lots of digging in a very, very short amount of time during 1939 and early 1940. So as you can see on the screen, the area in grey denotes the tunnel network, and the area in yellow is the section that we have lit and open to the public on a day-to-day basis. So this area is designed to look like it's 1940. So when you go in, you're greeted by an air raid warden. You are given an introduction to the life of people in Stockport in 1940, and then you get to make your own way around the lit section, the yellow section of the tunnels, with a self-guided tour. Now, if you want to pay a little bit extra, you can visit some of the unlit sections of the tour, and we also have experiences for people who like ghost stories, and we have ghost stories down the tunnels. We have engineering and photography tours down the tunnels, and we open up different sections to different groups of people. But if you go along on a standard day, you would visit just the yellow section, and that's still quite a substantial section of the air raid shelters. Stockport was bombed during the war. The shelters proved their worth. They sheltered and looked after, like I say, about 20,000 people in total from Stockport and from the Manchester area during the Manchester and Stockport Blitz and the bombing raids that arrived during the early years of World War II. The shelters were known as the Chestergate Hotel. This is because they were really quite luxurious for their time. They were 7 foot wide by 7 foot high. They didn't need any bracketing or supports because it's built in sandstone. They were dry, warm, well lit, and had flushing toilets, which is better than many of the houses in Stockport in 1940. A lot of the housing stock didn't have inside toilets, electric lighting, and heating, so they were quite luxurious. At the beginning of the war, they had these benches that were either side of the tunnels, and people would sit on the benches because the idea was that the bombing raids would only last for an hour, and then you would get up, go out of the tunnels, and go back to work. Unfortunately, the German Air Force cheated slightly by taking the whole of France and bringing themselves 700 miles closer to the UK, and then they could stay overnight and do bombing raids. So what we found quite quickly is that these benches were not adequate. So what happened was the bunks were put in, and people would stay overnight on these very comfortable bunks and wait out the long air raids of the later bits of the war. The network of tunnels had its own nurses' station, a maternity bay. It had jails for people who were drunk and disorderly. It had, as I say, flushing toilets and electric lights. It was a definite and really luxurious location to go to, and there isn't anything like it anywhere else in the UK. As I say, it was purpose-built. So to build something this large was quite an engineering experience in 1939, especially being built by hand with pickaxes and with pneumatic drills. And the sandstone that was taken out was used for building other sections of the town. As I say, Stockport was bombed This is quite a large bomb that landed, and it's not far from one of the shelters, which was just down into one side of the station. You can see there on the photograph. And this is a landmine, an aerial landmine that has made this huge hole. And that was as close as the German Air Force got. You can just see the railway tracks. If they'd been just to one side, they would have cut the main route between Canada and the United States and London and the South, and could have severely disrupted the British war production. So they were that close as part of their bombing campaign. So that's a brief bit of the history. What did we do? At the end of the war, the shelters were closed up. They were too sandy to become a mushroom farm, and they were too damp to become a document store. They were too shallow to become a nuclear bunker, and they were too dark for people to spend too much time in them. So they were closed up. They were forgotten about. They were left behind, including all the bunks, as you can see on the left-hand side there. The signage, as you can see on the right, were just left in the dark. They took out the lights and the copper wiring and anything that could be used for scrap value, and they left the tunnels just to sit in the darkness. Every so often they would be reopened, someone would take a look at them, and then they'd be left alone again. The impetus to become more of a visitor attraction happened in the early 1980s. So by the 1980s, we see a resurgence in interest in the war on the home front. It becomes part of teaching within schools, and this change from a more historical, this is a battle that happened on such and such a date, to this is the sociological impact of a battle on the people of Stockport, the people of the UK. And that shift in teaching means that there is renewed interest in what happened at home during World War II. Everyone knew the shelters were still there. They were regularly surveyed. They were regularly checked. But in the early 1980s, the local council, who had responsibility for them, took the decision that they were going to open them up for very, very limited tours. These were tours of 15, even 20 people with a hard hat and a miner's lamp. They were in overalls and gumboots, almost as if like going caving in this day and age. They weren't the sort of experience that you get nowadays with the shelters. And they were very limited. There were only 2 or 3 tours a year, and they were tended to be booked up to 2 years in advance. They would be able to go in and see the network of tunnels as they are now, as they are there, take photographs, have a look at the abandoned sections. The one on the right there is one of the toilet blocks, which consisted of a long pipe with lots of holes in the top, which may not seem like much now, but was very, very good and very safe during World War II. Lots of items were left behind, so we see lots of graffiti, we see lots of markings, we see lots of buckets and bits of wood, and items that were left behind in 1945 are still there in the tunnels, and they've been left where they are. We don't remove things unless we absolutely have to. There's no need for it. These aren't rare artifacts. They're things that they tell a better story where they are than they would be if they'd been removed from the tunnels. As I said, the bunks were moved in the early 1940s, and we do have trails of these bunks, these 3-tier bunks, going right the way through the tunnels. Nearly every tunnel has a set of bunks like this that were concreted in, and they weren't removed at the end of the war. They were just left there because they didn't have any scrap value, and it's not worth trying to pull them out now. They are sections in the tunnels which are even more unique than the actual tunnels themselves. So these photographs are of a gas curtain. So at the beginning of the war, there was a lot of fear about the use of gas by the German Air Force, and that they might seep into tunnel networks and kill everybody inside. And these are the relatively primitive but extremely effective gas curtains would roll down on these wooden slats to protect the people inside. And you can see the white paint there is original blackout paint. So we have original features that are nowhere else in existence because they've rotted away or they've been torn out and taken away from other air raid shelters where they did have them. It's quite spooky in the tunnels at the middle of the night. It gets about, you see that the air is always very cool. It's always 12 degrees in the air raid shelters. So you can get very interesting photography experiences by using your breath and by using some of the older bunks and things that are in there. And you can see that in the past, there have been people gone into the tunnels. They've left their own graffiti. They've used candles. This is the marks of soot from candles and various bits of graffiti as people have been in over the years, left their names and the date that they were there, and usually an arrow pointing towards the way out. A bit more graffiti here, and you can see with some sections are lined in concrete, and that's become a brilliant place for people to write graffiti, and it's a really nice way of seeing this. So the red 2 is in original 1940s engineering pencil or crayon, and the graffiti to one side there, the dark is candle smoke. And then you can see chalk, and you can see spray paint, and you can see layers of graffiti going right the way back through the last 80 years, layered upon each other. It's very interesting to map that and check that and see what's written there. What we've done in the section that's lit and open to the public is we have brought in items that would have been there and laid it out as if it is 1940. So we found some original 1940s signage that explained what to do if there was an air raid, because people hadn't experienced this in the north of England before. They'd had very, very limited raids 20 years earlier during World War I, but nothing of the range that they were going to expect for 1939. So we have really quite simple advice. So it says, don't stand and stare at the sky. Take cover, hide, lay down. And it's what seems like very simple advice, but people just didn't have the experience of what they thought would be coming. We have, as you can see, gas masks and capes and things in the medics bay, in the hospital section of the tunnels. And we have the experience there of having it laid out as if it's 1940. We, as I said, have had filming in the tunnels. So we have had various groups coming in to make different things as if it's 1940. We became quite popular for a while. Whenever there was a historical drama that needed an air raid shelter, we would be the one they came to. And you have to put your historical head to one side and let the creative process go. Quite often they're not exactly as they should be. Sorry about that. As if it is 1940, and especially if there's ghosts and various things involved in the spooky side of the filming. So we've got some photos here of what the tunnels look like now with some visitors in. You can see we have an audio-visual display. We have that's top left. Middle top is the education tunnel. As I said, we have up to 2 schools a day. Between 40 and 45,000 school children a year visit the air raid shelters, and they come into their own dedicated tunnel where everything is explained, and they go around as if it is 1940. We explain to the teachers in advance that that's what's going to happen so that the children are prepared, and we are very experienced with children who have neurodivergent needs or may get a little overwhelmed by being told that they have been evacuated and not going home. So we're very good at explaining that to the children. We use lighting that is in keeping. So you'll see the lighting that's in the tunnels is exactly the same as it would have been in 1940. We use bulkhead lighting and it's set up so you can have a walk around. The photograph on the lower left is the medical bay, and some of that furniture is actually the same furniture that's in the photograph from World War II. It was found in the tunnels, still there 80 years later, and was restored in the 1990s and put back into the tunnels. We also have a canteen where we have tea and coffee that they can look at how it would have worked, because there was a canteen in the tunnels at the time of the war. So people get a real experience of what it was like. They don't really get the crowding and the smell. We're working on that a bit, and we do possibly have a chance in the future to think about putting in things like smells and sounds. But at the moment, because we're using the self-guided tour that people use on their phone, on their mobile phone, it's easier to keep it simple and let people have that experience. So how did this come about? How did we get this point from where we were with the hard hat tours of the early 1980s? It was the public interest. Public interest meant that there was an opportunity to open a section of the tunnels, and we did it section by section. First off, we opened a very small section without a shop, without facilities, and we lit it with very limited lighting. That was in the early 1990s. Then as time went on, more funds were made available, and we had various grants that came from the government and from various heritage lottery funding, which we have in the UK. And that was able then to redo the lighting and then build the shop building on the front of the tunnel network. And that's where we have our toilets, we have all our controls, and we have obviously our emergency alarm systems. Because it is an underground network, we have to have safety in gas monitoring and fire monitoring, and we have to be able to communicate with the tunnels if need be. The communication is quite an interesting way that we do it. We can tannoy into the tunnels, but they cannot communicate with us at reception. We did have a quote for a two-way radio system, and it was insanely expensive. So we went back to the drawing board and we came up with a much simpler system that was used in World War II, and we bought whistles. So in the case of an emergency in the tunnels, each of the guides carries a whistle, and they blow the whistle, and we can hear that because the acoustics are so good in the tunnel network right from reception. We can then go in and check everything's okay. It's a very simple way of quite a complicated procedure. Now, obviously, we have all risk assessments, health and safety aspects, and we started doing these really early in the sort of World War II heritage arena in the UK. We were one of the first ones to open up like this, which meant that over the years, we've been able to assist many other areas in the UK that want to open similar places. So we've given valuable advice to places like the Ramsgate tunnels in Ramsgate in the UK, Cardiff Castle air raid shelters, Birkenhead High School for Girls air raid shelters, and other underground networks that we've been able to help with their gas monitoring, their procedures on evacuation in the dark, and very simple things like how many people do you have with a group, how many people can you bring in safely so they enjoy their experience. And we've been able to be glad to do that for very many places around the UK. So I've been reliably informed, and it's by Google, so please, I beg your apologies if I'm wrong, but I pronounce this Shay. Thank you so much for having me. I hope this has given you a little insight into what we do at Stockport. There are some places on the screen that you can get more information, and I really hope that you've enjoyed listening to this little case study. I've thoroughly enjoyed researching Matsu and Kinmen Islands. I guarantee I'm coming to visit. I hope that I'll be bringing a big group with me. They look absolutely amazing, and this initiative is brilliant. Thank you so much for having me. And do you have any questions?
Yeah. Thank you, Phil. I think your case is interesting and give me a lot of insight and have some comparison of the tunnels between UK and island of Mazu and Kinmen. And before Professor Zeng will maybe have more real experience on the conservation. Now I have some questions, and maybe you can give us more information. First thing is, although you said the first thing is financial, but you said that it's come from lottery funding, so that will be that's a very good system in UK. And yes, but for the tunnels, when you organize this kind of underground tunnel tour, what's the key challenges on some parts, like the physical part or some political part, even the research part? Is there some challenge on these parts?
There are a number of challenges. The physical and legal. Now, within the UK, we have two types of preservation orders. We have a listed building preservation order and a historic location. Then the historic location tends to be used more for an archaeological site, and the listed building tends to be more for buildings that are above ground. Now, the tunnel network is neither of those things. It's not technically an archaeological site, and it's not technically a building above ground. So we hit some big issues. So it's called the Scheduled Ancient Monuments Act. It's the long name for it. And it's only recently that they've started looking at places within the last 100 years that could be classed as archaeological. So we have a situation where our site has less protections than many others, despite its uniqueness. Now, within the UK, that can be a blessing or a curse. It can be a blessing because if it had those protections, we would not have been able to build the shop frontage, the toilets. We would not have been able to put the lighting in without it being much more expensive. So we have a couple of listed buildings within the museum service, and they are much more difficult to deal with. But it does mean that the tunnels are at risk. And we see this a lot in the UK. And this is where the other part of your question comes in, which is the difficulties in access. We, with Subterranea Britannica, with Subbrit, we find that we are dealing with landowners and building owners and local authorities who are terrified of letting people into these spaces. They're worried they're going to trip up, they're going to scratch their leg, they're going to get stuck, and they're going to sue the council. They're going to sue for damages because they've got dirty, or their trainers have got dirty, or they banged their head. And one of the things that we do with Subterranea Britannica is we work really hard to show that it's very easy and simple to open these spaces, and really safely. We have opened canal tunnels and railway tunnels. We've opened nuclear bunkers. We've opened places that have been sealed up for many years. We've opened networks of bunkers that are flooded 6 or 8 inches deep safely. And it is just about the risk assessments, the health and safety assessments, and the experience that comes from the knowledge. And the number of times we hear, oh, the local council have found an air raid shelter. They filled it with concrete. I'm like, why? It had water in it. It's like, simple fluid dynamics means that if you put concrete underneath where the water's going to go up. and we try to explain to local councils that these are protected, these should be protected sites, but maybe not protected so much that they become a burden. So we found that the cost of a lot of the retrospective fitting, while it wasn't quite up to the protected status, there would be hundreds of thousands of pounds. It was a lot more money than could be brought together easily by a local council. So we went for funding, and the best way to do that in the UK is through what's called the Heritage Lottery Funding Scheme. So the lottery that's played in the UK, millions of people play it twice a week. And a lot of the money that comes from that, from the very beginning, has gone into this Heritage Lottery Funding Scheme, and you can apply for grants. And we had a couple of really nice grants from them that meant we were able to do these places up to the best possible standard. And that, of course, increases our visitor numbers. Now, visitor numbers, you've got the two aspects of that. One is they bring in money, and you do have to bring in money. It's unfortunate to think of, but if you're not bringing in money, your day-to-day costs will outweigh your money coming in, and you will have significant difficulties. But there are a number of ways that money can come in, and whether it comes in through visitors paying for a tour, or visitors buying something in the shop, or visitors who are licensing photographs or filming. Our filming fees are a lot of money. They will vastly increase the amount of income over the tours that people walking in through the door. And of course, then what's called the soft impact of that. When we're on the television, when we're in films, we bring in that knowledge that people have, understand, actually, that's someplace I'd like to visit. And they then come to visit us. What we find is that we have repeat visitors. And I saw this when I was looking at the websites for the islands, for Matsu Islands. There is so much to do. The itineraries between 2 days and 4 days, and you're looking, well, I wouldn't manage all that in 4 days. So you're looking again at your repeat visitors. You want people who are coming in to do the simplified tour, then they're coming back for the extended tour, they're coming back for a ghost tour, they're coming back at Christmas to see Father Christmas, which we have in the tunnels. And then they're coming back for an art display when we have an exhibition. And this is what we want to do. We want those people to be coming back. We don't want them to be coming once when they're at school, once when their children are at school, and once when their grandchildren are at school. That's what we're fighting against. We want them to be coming back on a regular basis, and we want them to be bringing visitors with them every time they do. Does that answer your question?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
And also almost answer my second question is since the conservation, because the tunnel is underground, and do you have some conflict with the city development?
No, we really don't. It's quite an odd one, because the tunnel is dug from ground level into the side of a cliff. So we're very unique in that we have level access. We are totally accessible for wheelchair users, and we're totally accessible for people with sticks and canes, things like that. And we're also in the town centre. We're literally just off the main shopping street behind, you go behind Primark, and that's the entrance to the area shelters. So we're in this quite unique position that a lot of places don't have. We're directly underneath the town centre, but we don't impact any of the shops around us because there's 60 feet of sandstone between us and the shops above. And the shops either side, there's no worry about noise or anything like that. The only issue we've had is when we've been very, very busy, that we've had coach parking problems. And what we did is we had to do some negotiation to manage the coach parking so that we weren't interfering with the shopping streets and the shops around us. But actually bringing people into the shelters as part of their visit to the town centre and working with the town centre initiative has been really, really easy, which I know a lot of other places haven't had that. And we're very lucky, again, that we're owned by the local council. So our ultimate decision-making body is the one that owns the shelters. So
yes,
yeah.
Because what I'm sometimes like the underground tunnels, because if the building wants to have the basement,
Absolutely.
yes, they will destroy the tunnels. Like we face the case in Kingman. There are also tunnels like you, but will face the development. But But I remember the tunnels in Kinmen is not as depth as your tunnel is underground for 60 feet, but maybe
That's right.
In Kinmen maybe only 20 feet, only 6 meters,
Right.
6 meters. So that's already have facing the problem of the development, and so we can see it's a very lucky for your tunnels.
Yes, we like I say, we're very unique and very lucky in our network. And some of the times when we've been approached by other groups who have said, "Can you help us open our tunnels?" We've actually gone through all the work with them, and it's come to the end of the research and everything, and the decision's been made. Actually, it's not economical. It's not practical to open some of these tunnels. There's one in London, which is a beautiful air raid shelter under a central garden, but it has one spiral staircase entrance. There's no emergency exit and there's no accessible entrance. And it's open very, very rarely, despite being beautifully restored and looked after, just because people can't get in it. But we were lucky enough to help. Subbrit does grants as well to various underground groups. And there's a group that we helped. They had a network of tunnels, much smaller than Stockport. And they had a similar problem in that they had only a single entrance exit. And we were actually able to provide them with funding, and they were able to dig an extra tunnel. So they got an emergency exit, and then were able to open to much more visitors. And it was absolutely fantastic that we were able to help with that. So Subbrit does these grants. We've given grants to Mail Rail under London, to lots of places around for research, and then for very practical things like hard hats, buckets, signage. We did a lot of signage. And we always make sure that we are available then, that people can apply for money to Subbrit from any underground location. And the only criteria we have is that it can't be used for ongoing costs. So they've got to make their own way. And it must increase access to underground spaces. That doesn't necessarily mean physical access, because of course accessibility means photography, 3D scanning, LiDAR scanning, having that information available on the internet and various other places for research purposes. So some of the tunnels and things that we have been visiting have been so dangerous that you can't enter them. We worked with a group of archaeologists to research a flooded mine in Alderley Edge, and we put a submarine drone into the flooded network of tunnels, and it just did its own thing for a day or so and came back up. And we now have an entire network of these tunnels that are inaccessible, but the research is there.
Yeah, before my last question, I want to ask Professor Zheng, do you have some question if you can speak? Or
Okay, I just say the Chinese and you
I will translate. Okay.
好，那我的问题是深入地下60尺哈，那他们的当时的挖掘的方式啊，这第一个哈。第二个是它的构造是维持原来岩石，还是说用钢筋混凝土方式做加固？啊，这个不太了解它当时的一个构造的方式啊。第三个是它的通气孔。这些是不是有维持着？还有跟地面有连接的通气井吗？哦，以上这几个问题，好，谢谢。
Excellent. All very good questions. Thank you. So for question 1, the tunnels were dug by hand using pickaxes, shovels, and what's called a pneumatic drill. We have photographs of the people digging the tunnels. They were Irish miners who were brought across to help work on the roads in Stockport, and they worked in a shirt and tie and a jumper and a flat cap. No helmets, no safety equipment, no gloves, and we actually have a section of unfinished tunnel where we have it set up as if they were still digging, and we have the pneumatic drill, which is an air-powered drill chisel that would break into the sandstone. So the sandstone is very soft. It's very safe, but it's very soft. So it's very easy to dig. It's not it's still stone, but you can dig very quickly. So they dug up to 1 meter a day, and they dug the tunnels out very quickly. They were very used to hard work. But we have some photographs of the actual digging in process, so we know exactly how it was done. We also, from an archaeological standpoint, have the marks on the tunnel walls where you can see the pickaxes have gone in, and that you can see where the pneumatic drills have dug into the sandstone. So that's how they were dug. And then the spoil was taken out by wheelbarrows and dumped in the local river to create islands in the river. Number 2, we do have concrete sleeves reinforcing weak points in the tunnels. You could see a couple of them on the photographs where the graffiti was. Those are concrete sleeves that have been put in with wooden frameworks. They're beautifully made. You can see the imprint of the wood on the concrete when it's been made in those really nice arches, and the concrete's then been left to set and the wood's been removed. We also have concrete sleeves at each of the entrances. They're reinforced where the gas curtains are to stop it in case there was a bomb that landed on one of the entrances. There's 7 entrances, and not only do we have these very spread out across the tunnel network, we also have a tunnel that goes up towards the surface. So instead of being 60 feet down, it is only 10 feet down, and it comes up under a churchyard. So there was no building above it, and in a total emergency, they could dig down from above. And there were tools kept within the tunnels, emergency tools, so they could dig up. And the idea was, in a total emergency where they lost all the entrances, they could dig down and up at the same time, and they could get into the tunnels through this section in about 24 hours. Air supply is brilliantly done, and it's very simply done. The center of the tunnel network is slightly lower than the entrances. For the front entrances, it's about 18 inches or 45 centimeters. And for some of the entrances, there are stairwells where you go up to those entrances. So the air conditioning is done by people. You put the people in the middle of the tunnels, they're breathing out hot air rises, and it goes out the tunnels, the entrances that are higher up, and pulls fresh, clean air in through the lower entrances. And it still works. The tunnel air is always fantastic, despite us only having 3 entrances left of the original 7. The air quality is always absolutely brilliant in the whole network. But that's how it's done. The heat of those people packed together in the middle and their hot air going up and out draws fresh, clean air, cool air in through the entrances, which is why they had the gas curtains. And if the gas curtains were down and the entrances were sealed, they had enough air for everybody for a long time. I mean, it's a cubic mile of air. So that's the 3 questions. How were they dug? Do they have sleeve reinforcement? And how did the air supply work? I hope that answered those okay.
Yeah, that's very fantastic way to build a tunnel. And do you have, if you have time, I will have the last question is about the education, because you have 45,000 children, school children every year for visit your tunnels. Since the younger generation didn't experience the war. Do they are interested in this place, or how do you inspire their interests?
They are taught it through the school curriculum. So the days my grandparents were in the war, but my parents weren't. And the children today, it's their great-great-grandparents who went through this. So they don't have a physical connection to people. They don't have the people that they can talk to about this. So what they have on the school curriculum is that social experience of being in the war, having the rationing, the bombs, how it worked, and everybody going into air raid shelters and evacuation. It's taught as part of the national curriculum, and it's quite well done. So what we do is we give an opportunity for the children to experience what that's like. So when they come to us, they can choose to have a school visit where the class comes and it's 2025. They're coming from school, they're going to a museum, and they're looking to see what the air raid shelters look like during World War II. Now, the older children tend to come for that one. The younger children, 8 or 9 years old, we have it where they're coming to an air raid shelter because they have been evacuated. So they come in costume. The teachers are given handouts in advance to explain what's going on, who's the Prime Minister, what Germany is, and things like that. And they're explaining that they have been evacuated. So when they arrive at the shelters in a what we call a crocodile, a 2x2 formation when they walk to the shelters, it is 1940. They're greeted by people in 1940s who treat them as if it's 1940 for the whole of their visit, including their lunch break, their sandwiches and everything, as if it's 1940. And they're told that they've been evacuated, the air raid siren has gone, and they have to come into the shelters to experience, the air raid. We have sound effects, we have a siren that goes off, and we have them, they spend their whole time in there as if it is 1940. They love it. Children love dressing up. They love pretend, and they come away from it raving about what a wonderful time they've had. We regularly get a week, 2 weeks later, that child is coming back with mum and dad. Then they're coming back with mum and dad, granddad and granny. They're going home telling people what a wonderful time they've had on this experience. So we have that unique selling point that we can make it look like it's 1940, that it's a whole experience if that's what the school wants. If they want it to be a museum visit, we can do that too, and that's okay. And then we'll have people who are museum guides who will take them around as a guide. But we can have that thing, and I think that is the thing that gets people's attention. And what we find is that schools will travel a very long way. They will travel hundreds of miles to come to this unique experience because it's the one that sears itself into the children's memory, and they have so much fun doing it. And that they go home and talk about it. So that does help. We're also competitively priced. We charge a reasonable amount per child. So what you find is that people who are further away, the parents are more willing to spend. If you live within walking distance of the air raid shelters, you don't want your child to pay over and above for the coach, for the dressing up to come to the shelter that they can go to on Saturday. And what you want is that the people who are a bit further away, they make it a day's experience. So they're coming on the coach, they spend the morning in the air raid shelters. We have a room in one of our other museums, which is set up as if it's 1940s schoolroom. That's where they go for their lunch, and they have a 1940s style lunch. There's loads of stuff to play with, hats, helmets, gas masks that have been safely changed out. The thing is, we've found at the minute is lots of photographs. It used to be that nobody took any photographs on a school visit because it was the children, and nobody ever took photographs of children. And now they're all taking photographs of each other. And what we found is that we now are advising the teachers where the best place to stand is to get the right photograph that you then send off to the parents to show what a wonderful time the children have had. So that's how we get them in. We have education packs that you can download for free from our website, which is the one that's on there. I put the website on for the air raid shelters earlier. You get the pack and it explains why the shelters were built, how they were built. You get all the background in advance, and that really does help the teachers in their lesson planning. For them, it's basically what we call an easy win. It's a great way to get some really good feedback from the children, feedback from the parents, and feedback for the school for a reasonable price. And that we deliver the whole package for them, which is great, especially because the teachers get dressed up too. So the teachers are as if it's 1940 as well as the children. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, that's fantastic, and you give us lots of inspiring about what's the challenge and how the conflict of conservation, and even the best is how you education and interpretation of your tunnels. Thank you very much, Phil. And we hope your tunnel is going well, and we hope we can see you in Kinmen or Mazu in the future.
I really hope so. As I said, looking at the websites and everything, it looks like an amazing place. And it looks absolutely brilliant.
I have I want maybe when next time we have a 1 hour speech for us.
Excellent. That would be lovely. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. That would be great.
就是刚才他讲很多他教育类的带领很多，因为时间很有限，只能知道基本历史。如果未来能够比较长的演讲，能够介绍更详细，我想会更清楚。
That would be fantastic, and I would love to do that for you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much.
And fingers crossed, shay shay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.